So, welcome back to the podcast, Trial by Fire, Untold Stories. Myself, RJ, we got Jared, special guest today, Kurt Schoenfeld.
Thank you for having me on the podcast, guys.
You're welcome. I have the unique pleasure of working with you at Howell Rescue Systems. I'll let you do your intro, but I am a little bit biased because I do get to share the wall of an office with this man, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
The wall?
Well, we talked about cutting a hole in the wall or running like a can and a string, through the wall.
Ooh, that might work.
There'd be so much more room for activities.
There would. We talked about taking the wall down and doing like a joint office super desk type situation.
Ooh.
So I don't know. But without further ado, go ahead.
Well,
Introduce
thank
yourself.
you. Thank you very much. My name is Kurt Schoenfeld. I'm a local sales rep here in Southwest Ohio. I've been with the company for 31 years, something like that. As we do this podcast, we're just prepping to head out to FDIC 2024. And I was looking around in the basement the other day. For the last few years before I've gone to FDIC, I found an old badge from my first FDIC in 1993.
Really?
So I've been taking a photo of that, and I'm posting it, like, come see me before I'm not there anymore,
That's awesome.
So I've been with the company here for, like I said, 31 years. I guess my background is I spent some time in the fire service in Mad River Township, which is a suburban department in Montgomery County. We were a 3-station fire department. We were volunteers at night. I was there from, 1983 till 1990, something like that. And they were the funnest years of my life. I see some of those guys. I've seen a couple of them at funerals because a couple of us are going. But those were the 7 funnest years of my life. If we were not at the Firehouse, we were at somebody's house all together, or we were at the bars together. And we were inseparable and just had a great, great time. I spent 7 years there. Met a girl in 1985, I think, and we got married in 1989, and she said, I'm not living here anymore. We're moving somewhere nicer, so we moved somewhere nicer. And I lived in the city of Kettering for just a few months, and I would hear the rigs going up and down the road, and I thought, man, I miss this stuff. So I got on with the city of Kettering, another Montgomery County, Ohio department. We were 7 stations. A little bit busier department, a little bit larger clientele to serve. And that's where I met the gentleman that owns our company here, Howell Rescue Systems in Kettering. He sat in on an interview where I was interviewed to get on the fire department. He didn't have a whole lot to say, and the captain said, hey, we're going to do some training tomorrow night. Why don't you come down and and kind of watch us train? So I went down and watched him train, and I thought, man, they've got some really good stuff, nice equipment, everything's new, and I could be a superstar among these idiots. So I kind of, and I'm kidding, any old KFD guys out there, I'm kidding. And
Sure.
So Todd was at that training, and kind of the true Todd kind of showed up that night, and we immediately became friends. We spent a lot of time together. We raised our kids together. Well, he and I didn't have kids. He had his own kids, and I had my own kids. And so we spent a lot of time. And then he actually said, hey, man, I got this rescue tool company, and I'd really like you to maybe consider coming to work for me. And I'm like, I don't know. I've got a really good college career. I'm going to be an X-ray technician, and I'm really dialed in on this. So I'm like, let me go home and talk to my wife about it. So she, I went home and talked to her about it, and she's like, seriously, can you really see yourself as an X-ray technician? You live, eat, and breathe this fire department stuff. Yep. Why don't you just give it a shot? And I'm like, I don't know. So, okay. And she's like, give it a shot. If it doesn't work, we'll live on my salary for a while. So 30 years later, I'm still kind of evaluating, whether I'm going to stick around or not.
What would you have done if she didn't help you move, help you get a job?
I really don't know, man. I honestly don't know. I'm a perfect example of a blind squirrel finds a nut in the forest. I mean, I married up. When I found this
Sure,
girl,
yeah.
I married up. You know her.
Yeah.
I married up. I really did. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then I guess some of the values and such that I learned as a kid, the fire service kind of took over that role of a secondary parent, if you will, and it taught me, first and foremost to respect my elders. It taught me respect for others. It really taught me the feeling of empathy for others, because nobody says, hey, we're having a great day, let's call 911 and have the fire department come out. The fire department sees people on their worst days. And anybody that's ever ridden backwards in a fire truck or in the back of a medic unit understands that. And we have we have a better understanding of empathy, as I mentioned, and we have a much better respect for our surroundings, and we're a little bit more in tune with our surroundings, and I've tried to kind of instill that into my kids, and then prior to that, I built homes for a long time, so I had a really, really good understanding of residential construction. So if we were in a room and contents or a good cooking fire, I knew that when we pulled up, if it was a newer model home, I knew that there was going to probably be 5/8 drywall between the garage and the residence, and then 1/2-inch drywall everywhere else. Or if we pulled up and it was an older residence, I knew that we were going to probably be pulling plaster and lath off of legit 2-inch by 4-inch old heavy lumber, and that was going to be a lot more work to get in and do overhaul. So I had a really good understanding of building construction, home residential construction, and I think that really helped me in my fire service, the time that I spent riding fire trucks.
That's interesting, because what would you say? How did you kind of relay that? Because a lot of people probably don't come into the fire service with that level of technical knowledge about built structures.
So when I'm out in the career that I'm in now, and I'm out in certain areas of the state, if I'm in a metro setting where career guys are versus out, way out in a rural setting, a lot of those rural setting guys, I always use the example, you give a guy a Sawzall, to work on an extrication with, and if he is a plumber, an HVAC guy, or a carpenter, man, look out, give him a Sawzall, and he can destroy that car, because they have a good understanding of operation of those power tools, and that translates if I'm just cutting a floor joist out with a Sawzall to get a heat run through, that guy can destroy a car with a Sawzall. So I guess that really kind of parlayed over into a really good understanding of how this building is constructed, and maybe also if it starts to fall apart, how it's going to fall apart.
Sure.
Like on a roof, if we were cutting a hole in a roof, I know that newer model home was probably 7/16 OSB. It had some black 15-pound felt paper on it, and then a single layer of shingles. Whereas if it was an older residence, it may be 2. Hell, I've cut holes in roofs before that had 3 layers of shingles on it, and that's a lot of work. That's a whole lot of work.
So you have different people that come into the fire service with different backgrounds, and how does that meld together? I mean, do you know that beforehand? You go onto a call, or their background? Hey, yeah, they've worked whatever construction, their background.
Well, yeah. Keep in mind that it's in all honesty, and we shared this before we went live on the podcast. I've not ridden a fire truck in anger in 20 years, but I'm still in I'm in firehouses. I've been in more firehouses than I've eaten hamburgers, because I've done this job for 30 years, and I have a very, very good understanding of the fire service. I feel I'm probably at my highest comfort level when I'm out on the drill ground in turnout gear, showing rescue tools or training, especially training young guys, especially training young guys that are willing to and want to learn, So
I want to circle back for a second because I had this conversation a little earlier, and you had mentioned that Firehouse kind of became like a secondary parent, and kind of helped you in the way that you raise your kids, and that's super powerful. And I think some people get that, some people might miss that, but I think today's struggle is you went through the Firehouse at a totally different time than some of the young kids going through a Firehouse now. What when you're out in firehouses and stuff, are you seeing that difference in what you would consider like the firehouse structure and disciplinary actions and that kind of thing?
I was at a funeral a few years ago when one of our guys died, and I walked into the funeral home, and I was one of the last ones to get there, and it was the typical circle of older guys in the back of the funeral home, and I walked in and I walked up and I looked at them all up and down, and I'm like, God, you guys look like shit. and I'm like, compared to me, and they're like, shut the hell up. And, so that's in the fire service, that is, hello, I miss you, brother. It's good to see you. And a lot of these guys I hadn't seen, and man, I'll bet I hadn't seen some of these dudes in 15 years. And it was like I'd seen them just 2 weeks ago. Wow. But the difference today, I guess, there's a difference, I think. Keep in mind, I started doing it in 83, I think. So there is a big difference. I mean, when I started in the fire service, we would run into the back of the firehouse, and we'd put on pull-up boots, a long coat, and we'd back up to the wall and put on one of 3 SCBAs that we had for our entire station. And then we would take 2 steps forward, step up onto the tailboard of the rig, look around the side, and scream, go. So
Wait,
no.
They don't do that anymore?
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Stopped doing that a long time ago. Well, because we were losing people off the back, and there was somebody's like, damn, maybe we shouldn't be doing this stuff.
Novel concept.
But we're screaming through town on the outside of a rig, and to make it even more interesting, we've got rockets strapped on our back.
Sure.
So
essentially.
So the firehouse was different back in that time. But back to what I said earlier, anybody that's ever ridden a fire truck backwards or in the back of a medic unit, you again see people on their worst day of their lives. And how has that changed? People died back in the 80s just like they do today. So that aspect hasn't really changed that I see. I don't use the term firefighter. I should, because it's the proper title for these guys. But I'm an older guy. I was a fireman, and I don't really know that there's any plus or minus or any bad or any good. Some people may take offense to it, but I still look at myself as an old fireman, even though I haven't, again, ridden it in a long time. But, I guess the old saying is once a fireman, always a fireman. I go to bed and I still have clothes, like laid out on the floor next to my bed. And my wife is like, you're not going anywhere tonight, baby. I'm like, well, you never know. Yeah. You never know.
That's funny.
So the comment, seeing people on their worst day, when you would run calls and you'd walk into or you would approach a scene, did that run through your head at that time, or is this something that you think about now?
The way that I dealt with it was like, let's get the task done, that needs handled right now, and then we'll deal with the aftermath later on. Anybody anybody that's going to listen to this podcast that has done this, I would think they'll probably say the same thing. And you deal with the task at hand. Anybody that's ever done this again, we all have, calls and or incidents that we will never forget. I'm sure that if I become a dementia patient, there's going to be calls that I will not forget, because they made an impact on me. I won't go into the details, but one of the incidents that I had one night, terrible, tragic evening, I won't tell you all about that, but that really instilled into me, my wife and I have 3 kids, and every single time that my wife and or kids, if we hang up from a phone call, or they leave the house and they go home, or we're out for a restaurant dinner or something and we separate, no matter if we're just a little bit upset or a lot upset, we always end the conversation or the phone call with, I love you, because you just never know. You just absolutely never know. In the general public sees a tragic car accident, at 6:03 on the news, and then at 6:05 we're over to Bob for traffic and weather.
Right.
So they don't understand the things that go on in the fire service that the media never has any idea about. No idea one bit whatsoever. So those things, I think they shaped me. I think they shaped me for the better. At this funeral. Back to the funeral, I know I'm bouncing all around here, but at this funeral, I was talking to some of the fellas, and I'm like, man, we got to get together and burn some hamburgers and drink some beers for any more of you old dumbasses die off, So I'm like, let's do this.
Once again, very endearing.
Yeah. Y'all show up at my house. I'll buy everything because y'all are a bunch of cheapskates. I got everything. And so several of them showed up. I'm like, bring your wives, bring your kids, whatever. So we're grilling hamburgers and hot dogs and drinking beers and yucking it up. And one of the guys had an old VCR tape. And this dude, he was just hilarious. And he's like, you got anything that'll play this? And I'm like, actually, I do. So I get onto the basement, and I'm like rummaging through stuff, and I find an old TV VCR combo, and we pop this video in. And I'm like, oh shit, man, I forgot about that one. A fire that we had, or a bad accident on Woodman Drive or something. I was like, and I'd forgotten like a whole lot of them. And I think that was, that may have been a little bit of a coping mechanism for me, to just kind of forget the bad shit. You don't forget all of it, but and we had this one dude. His thing was to get onto the local media. So we had and he was so good about it. And we were at a car wreck at Woodman and Burkhart one night. And and it was a bullshit call, but I'm in this car and I'm working with this lady, and he runs in with a KED. Any of you old guys will know what a KED is. He runs in and he's like, here. And I'm like, I don't need that. And he's like, yeah, I know, but Channel 7's here. And I'm like, get the hell out of here, man. And then he would always look away from the camera, and he'd lift his helmet up to show his face, and then he'd act like he was talking into his radio. And we're like, you're such a jackass, man. But it made the local media all the time, and it was so funny. And on that videotape that he brought down, there he is, lifting his helmet, talking into his radio, talking to nobody. And it was just so funny, man. Just so funny.
So one of those interesting things of how you've run so many calls, even back in the day, and whether someone's been in the fire service for 7 years, 20 years, 30 years, they have how many calls that's logged into their data, right? How does that shape a person? Like, obviously, you're talking about one in particular. Did that one call shape you immediately? And looking at the totality, how does that actually shape somebody?
That particular call, that was the first time that I'd ever felt the need to go to a funeral service. I didn't go to the funeral for the victim. I went to the viewing, and I went. And I don't want to tell too much about this, but I went at the very end, and there were a lot of people there, and there was one person there that just kept giving me the stink eye, and I'm trying to look down and away, and this person finally comes up, and they're like, "Who the hell are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just an acquaintance." Well, I know everybody, but I don't know you. Who are you? And I said, "Well, I'm one of the firemen." And she's like, "Oh my God." And I'm like, "Oh man." So I literally, she disappeared, and I contemplated running out to my truck, walking out to my truck, see somebody running through a parking lot at a funeral home. But I considered briskly walking out to my truck, and I was just, I'm gonna get the hell out of here, man. And she came back, and she took my hand and wanted me to speak to the family. And I'm like, "Please don't. No, please don't. I don't want to do this." And after I did, I was really glad that I did, because I felt that it was, and I don't know what it was about that call. But anybody listening to this, they know, "Oh yeah, I remember that call for me." And but that made a big impact on me. And speaking to the family, and again, in 14 years, I never did that, but I think it helped me, and I honestly think it helped the family too. And so that did definitely make an impact on me, which goes right back to, even if my daughter's a little pissed off at me on the phone, she always says, "I love you," and that's kind of how those things come about,
I know that it's probably hard to even answer this. Take a shot at it. What would have happened if you hadn't gone to that funeral or the viewing?
I don't really think, from a psychological standpoint.
Sure.
I think I'd have been all right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have been all right. I think back to another one, and anybody listening to this, they'll understand. Not everybody's cut out to be a fireman. I was talking to, and there's no shame in that at all. I was talking to, it's just like me, like if I was handling the accounting here, boy, we would be one screwed up company, because
We'd have a problem.
we would have a problem. And but I was talking to a fire chief in an area that I used to handle, and he's been around a long time too, and we were buddies, and he told me, I think I was going up to do some training on some new tools that they bought from me. And I'd called to, like solidify, "Hey, are we good next Tuesday at 7?" He's like, "Yeah, we're good." And we started bullshitting around a little bit on the phone. And he's like, we had a pretty serious crash a couple of weeks ago, and some of my young guys are kind of struggling with it. And I'm like, "Yeah, what happened?" And I won't give you the details, but it was a multi-fatality crash. And I said, "So some of your young guys are on the struggle bus with that a little bit?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Well, man, I'll tell you what, that's part of being a fireman. That is part of being a fireman. You got to deal with stuff like that, and you got to kind of compartmentalize that, especially when the shit's getting really deep, and then you deal with it later on." But and that's my personal opinion. I may be wrong in how I'm saying that. But I said, you should maybe consider telling some of these guys, "Hey, man, that's, you saw the last breath of these folks, and there's maybe being a fireman's not for you. Maybe you should be an engineer. Maybe you should be an accountant. Maybe you should be a plumber, a carpenter. We all have our own strengths and our own weaknesses. And maybe a fireman's just not, the job for Billy to do that. Maybe he's a great carpenter. Maybe he's a super smart engineer, but maybe being a fireman, maybe that's that's not it. And there is absolutely no shame at all in feeling that way. And he's like, man, I'll tell you what, would you mind, if that comes up, would you mind having that conversation with some of my guys? And I'm like, well, I'm more than 50 miles away. I got a briefcase, so I'm an expert. But if I'm not gonna bring that up, unless they do. And I know this guy well enough. He's a chief. I know him well enough, and I could say, and don't you prompt them to talk to me about that. But if it does, and then one of their young guys, I'm like, all right, let's open our coats and take our hats off for a little bit and take a break. And then one of the young guys says, well, hey, what would you do if, this fender or the front part of this car was down, like set the scenario up. And I'm like, well, I don't know. It's kind of hard to answer that, without being there. And he's like, well, the car is in this salvage yard. It's right over there. And I'm like, well, let's go over and look at it. And I walked by the fire chief, and he kind of like looked at me like that. And I'm like, and I acted like dropped a glove or something and let him get ahead of me. And I'm like, is this the car? And he's like, yeah, that's the car. And I'm like, oh, man. So we kind of went down that road, and I just kind of shared, that, like maybe this isn't for everybody, and there's no shame if it's not, So
I feel like that should be way more normalized than it is.
Yeah.
There's that stigma that, everybody, being a firefighter is so glamorized or whatever the word is, outside looking in, but when you get in it, and then I think a lot of people feel like they made that commitment and have to see that through. But I think you're right. I think people should feel like, hey, it's not for everybody.
Being a fireman, and I'm going to borrow the phrase from a buddy of mine in this industry, being a fireman is a blue collar job. And, I'm all about females in the fire service. I'm completely on board with that. I encourage that. Hell, my mother was a woman. And, so I'm all about that. And, but it's a tough job, and it's a blue collar job. And you got to be able to think on your feet. You really got to be able to think on your feet, and you got to have some body mass. You got to have some body strength too. It is a blue collar job for sure, still today.
Okay, I got a question. I want to go down a road here. If you'll come with me,
down the rabbit hole we go.
Yep. I might not. I might just check out.
Come on, let's go. It's a party.
So, are there any stories, and obviously, this we can edit out, whatever, only share what you're comfortable with, but is there any stories that come to mind that you are comfortable sharing that we can talk about lessons learned? Like, is there anything that sticks out that you're willing to share with a little bit more detail? Because there's people out there that have shared experiences.
On a serious note, we got sent to a residence one time, and it was a soccer mom, and she called us. I don't know why the dispatcher sent us, but her dog was stuck under the deck. So the lieutenant said, "Ma'am, do you have any dog biscuits?" And she brought him out, and the lieutenant pulled the dog biscuit out of the box and started eating them. And he's like, "Fellas, cut a hole in the top of the deck." True story.
And what was the lesson you learned from that?
Yeah, what did you learn?
Just curious.
Don't let the goddamn dog get up under the deck.
I can't. Oh my God, that's so funny. Okay, don't let your dog under the deck. Got it.
Got it.
Check. Moving on. God, that's funny. So, all right. So you had, and then I'll rephrase. So you had your career in the fire service, and then you've had an obviously successful career as still in the fire service, but in a different way through sales and service and, all that. So is there anything that you could think back to that really is that you brought with you from the fire service that's made you or kind of molded you into
Sarcasm?
For sure.
Of the of the rescue disciplines in the fire service, I was a terrible ropes guy. When it came to EMS, I could get you in the back of the ambulance and really drive really fast to get to the hospital to dump you off at the hospital. But I developed I really liked auto extrication. I loved everything about rescue tools. And and I actually remember, Todd doesn't remember this, but Todd actually brought tools out to the department that I was on, the first department in, probably 86, and did a demo. And I didn't think anything of it. And I was just a really, really young knuckle dragging mouth breather at the time. And little did I know that fast forward 20 years later, I'd be working for his company for 30 years. So that kind of intrigued me. And when I got into this career, I didn't realize that I would be here as long as I have, but I've loved almost every minute of it. And what do I bring from the fire service to this portion? Is that kind of where you're going?
Yeah, because there's a lot of things that I'm sure in, from a discipline standpoint or whatever it is that has sort of made you, the man you are today and has brought you to be as successful as you are. So what do you think you've carried over from the fire service specifically that you kind of applied and used to grow?
I think that goes back to one of the first things that I said is respect for my elders, the chain of command, and empathy. And I place a lot of value on all three of those. I really do. Sometimes I may be dealing with a department and they're just broke, but man, we need some rescue tools really, really bad. Well, you know what? Maybe you don't need this. Maybe you don't need the King Donkey Kong of everything that we've got. Let's see if we can find you some used tools to get you by until you can, get a grant. Mm-hmm. So it taught me, to work with those that may be a little less fortunate, but I'm still making an impact on those guys. I'm still helping them. And then a work ethic. Where I was building homes, that taught me one hell of a work ethic that I feel I still have today. And I still, I feel I have a very, very strong work ethic, especially when I'm away from the office and I'm out in the field and I'm working with fire departments. And that's probably really where I'm most comfortable now. And especially as I'm starting to kind of see the end of my career, and I'm working with departments or firefighters that are really into like vehicle extrication. That's where I really want to. I love to spend time with those folks, especially if I can really see that he or she are really dialed in and are listening to everything that I have to say. And that's where I want to make the impact in the fire service in my last several years here is teaching some of these younger folks angle of attack with a spreader tip, angle of attack with a cutter blade, how to do this right and how to not do it wrong. I didn't say that right, but I think you know what I'm saying. But that's kind of my objective in my last few years here, several years here, is I want to make an impact, especially in the fire service, on younger firefighters and how to properly use these rescue tools. Because the market is now all battery driven tools. And they perform the same way, but they may be just a touch heavier. And when you're picking up a spreader, a cutter, a combi tool, you're really picking up a spreader, a 30-foot hose, and a power unit, and it's all contained in this one small, tight, compact package. So it might be just a little bit heavier. So we need to hit the gyms, bitches. To kind of bulk up a little bit to be able to sling these around.
Sure.
And everything's not always down here at waist high. We may have to hold that 47-pound tool up above our head, to make some cuts and some spreads. So the physical aspect of it, I think, is really important now, and the fire service is having trouble getting good quality employees. So that's even a little bit of a role, or a little bit of a variable also. So we can't take we can't send out a rig full of old fat guys. When the public calls 911 and they see a fire truck show up, they want all these dudes to jump off and be ripped and be wearing superhero capes, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what they expect, and I kind of feel that that's what they deserve, the public.
How do you marry the idea of superhero and reality? Because I've heard it before from firefighters. They don't always like the superhero put on them. They're just...
No, I agree with that. That's what the public
right.
expects you to jump off and know exactly what the hell you're doing. But also, this is a job for a lot of these guys.
Yeah.
It's a job. It's a job like you and I, it's a job like the three of us come to the office and do whatever we do. I don't blame them for not wanting to, be looked at as superheroes, but that's what the public wants. That's what the public expects. Did I answer that right?
Yeah. I'm just curious on how you deal with that. Like, I mean, obviously...
Well, I don't deal with it anymore. I just drive around this really cool truck and tear cars up.
It's not a bad gig. Yeah. And I think that is one of the common themes through the episodes is, how people deal with, I keep calling it, firefighters get put on a pedestal by their community, right? Because they're supposed, that's what they expect, right? Like you said, that's superhero or whatever. So, we've kind of been exploring, like, how does somebody engage with the community so that it doesn't always have to be a pedestal? They can, I think there is a realistic expectation as who's going to show up if you call the fire department, but also they're human, right? They're people getting off that rig, and people make mistakes or whatever it is. So I don't know if you have any insights on that, but
I don't. And I'm, I know that's not the answer you were looking for. I'm like, hell, I don't know. But I see a lot of guys out there, and I'm like, man, I wouldn't want you to rescue me out of a garbage bag full of like empty beer cans. But there are a lot of other guys, that I work with, and I'm like, damn, if I was stuck in a 747 under an M1 Abrams tank, I want that dude coming to get me. And there's a lot of those guys out there, especially in the area, of the state that I work in. But yeah, and those are the dudes that I want coming to get me if I'm in trouble.
So let's talk about those guys for a minute, because I think there's probably some common...
I'm not going to name any names because it'll get to their heads.
Yeah. So there's probably some common attributes, right? I think there's stuff that you took with you from the fire service, kind of turned you into who you are today. When you're out there and you're talking to those guys, what are you seeing in those young firefighters that makes you go, yeah, I want to help this guy really, like, get to the next level?
I think one of the first things, if I'm out, working with departments in demos or trainings, and I see younger guys, 20s, 30s, 40s that show up and they're fit and they don't have a chip on their shoulder, I'm like, I want to work with that dude, because he knows that it's a blue-collar job. He knows that he has to be physically fit. He knows that he has to have some cardiovascular duration to him. And I'm like, that dude gets it. And that's the dude that I want to work with tonight, on tonight's drill ground, instead of the fat guy that shuffles across the bay floor in Crocs, and takes forever to get there. Like a lot of the guys wear Crocs. I'm okay with that. But I don't want the fat, sloppy guy that's moving really, really slow because he kind of doesn't give a shit. But that dude that is in the gym 4 or 5 days a week, and he's not building gym muscles, he's building work muscles. That's the dude that I want to work with.
That's a good point. Okay.
How do you know somebody doesn't have a chip on their shoulder? Like you said, they look the part, they're fit, they're cardio, but doesn't have a chip on their shoulder. Like, how do you recognize that?
The guy that's got and anybody listening to this will be like, yep. But the guy that's got his arms folded, the dark glasses on, the head over, and the scowl on his face, yeah, that's a guy that I kind of may want to stay away from. But a guy that's got his head straight up and he's looking at you in the eye and he's like kind of nodding a little bit when you're saying stuff, like that's the guy that's got a good attitude. That's the guy that wants to be here. I talked to a fire chief. I won't tell you who or where, but not all that long ago, and he offered a full-time position to a young guy, and the young guy actually kind of teared up, and the chief's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And he's like, "Man, you're chief, you don't know what you just did here. You don't know how you just changed my life." That's the guy that the fire service needs. That guy that gets, like kind of choked up when he gets offered a full-time slot. That's the kind of guy that the fire service needs. In this fire chief got one.
How do you balance the level of confidence that you need to have within the fire service and the level of humility that you need to have? Like, those two things, maybe they don't run against each other. Maybe they do run together. But you know what I'm talking about? They both have to be there.
I guess I would answer that like there's a big difference in what I do now. There's a great big difference in arrogance and confidence.
Okay.
A huge difference in arrogance and confidence. And confidence is we all have our own certain talents. There's a lot of guys in this industry that are really, really, really good. I've got some talents, I've got some skills, but there's always somebody better, down the road and around the corner, So I think that when I'm out there in the field representing myself and the company, I know the products really, really well, and I want to get across to the customer that I'm confident and not arrogant. There's a huge difference in those two words. Now, if it's a bunch of guys that that I've known for a long time, I mean, like, let's go, we're gonna have some fun, and we're insulting each other and busting balls, and you like, damn, hit it with your other purse, or you're like, damn, are you gaining weight, and but the difference in arrogance and confidence, huge difference. Yeah.
Confidence with still a willingness to learn.
Definitely. Yeah. Willing to, and I'm still learning this stuff, and but confidence in transmitting that story to especially the younger generation, because I tell these people, like, especially in a small town, a small rural setting, you show up with 2 on the engine, 2 on the medic, or maybe you're real fat that night, you got a whole bunch of guys that are showing up. There's a really good chance that somebody on the crew is going to know somebody in that crash. So you gotta have a really good understanding of how to control any and all of those emotions until the job is done. And drill until you can't do it wrong. So that's kind of one of the stories that I try to tell some of these guys when I'm out there in the field working with them.
So I'm gonna circle back to some of the stuff you talked about originally, and we were given a little bit of your background. Now, I know you're not a wife, but the lessons.
Did he say, "I know you're not a wife"?
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah. Just like your mom was a
Yeah,
woman.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's true.
it's a lot of things we've covered.
So your girls and your wife learned from what you did collectively. Firefighters, they're not just firefighters. They're parents, they're spouses. How do they learn, or maybe even to people that are listening, this is not just firefighters that are listening to this. Spouses are listening to this. What encouragement do you have to the spouses?
Oh boy. There was a time that I would come home and I'd talk about calls, and then I'm like, maybe that's not so cool to do. Maybe I shouldn't be doing that. And then especially, like when we started having kids, I wouldn't talk about calls like that with my kids around. And we had at the entrance to my neighborhood, we had a pretty serious crash, and one of my neighbors rolled by, and he's like, "Man, there's a really bad crash up there, the front of the neighborhood." I'm like, "Shut the hell up, get out of here," because we were kind of that, that was our friendship. And he's like, "No, man, seriously, it's a bad one." So I went up, and it was a bad crash, and I knew the fellows that were there, and I asked the battalion, I'm like, "You need some help?" And before I went up there, I told my kids, I'm like, "Do not go up there. You stay right here." And I'm like, "Mom, make sure these jackasses stay here, my boys." and I got up there, and it was a bad crash. And I look up, and there's those two boys, my two boys, standing there watching. And I'm like, man, So how do you talk to a spouse? Geez, I don't know. I can't answer that. I guess I would say that some days your spouse may come home from the firehouse and maybe not in the best of moods. Like maybe give them a little bit of space. That I guess that would be my answer. Just give them a little bit of space and be there to support them.
If you didn't, I can relate to shielding your kids from that kind of stuff. Did you have other people that you were leaning on during your time in the fire service? Just other guys, or your chief, or how were you guys dealing with that?
Jim Beam, Budweiser, stuff like that. Probably shouldn't name product names in here. Let's delete that.
Let's roll it back.
Delete that part. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'd talk to each other. We'd always, back before the internet, we'd all try to make sure that we would see the news, and then we would kind of critique, like what could we have done better. And every firehouse in the United States does that, like what could we have done just a little bit better. And but talking to the fellows is a whole hell of a lot better than talking to your neighbor next door that's a CPA, because the fellows can understand, the CPA doesn't,
They can relate.
Yeah, the fellows relate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the funniest call you've ever been on?
Probably the dog biscuit thing.
Come on. There's another dog.
I don't know that I
very
should.
funny, though.
I don't know that I should tell this one.
Okay, go ahead.
You
Yeah,
may may want to cut this one out. So we had a
There we go.
we had a full arrest in a house trailer one time, and it was a big fat guy, and I'm sorry, it was an obese patient, and I'm on this is back when we had, we didn't have these goddamn power cots that these kids have today, and I step out with the fat guy onto the black metal stairs that went up to the trailer, and the stairs started shaking, and then they shook more, and then they collapsed, and I fell on my ass, and the wheels of the cot landed right between my legs. Had those wheels landed on my legs, and it broke both of my femurs.
Yikes. Oh my God.
And so we're like, damn, hoping nobody saw that. So we get the guy back up, And then we had another. It was I don't know. I don't know. You might want to cut this one out too. But it was a full arrest, and we run out to, back then we called them squads. We run out to the squad, and we forgot the first inbox in the house. So I'm like, I'll go get it. So I ran out of the side of the squad up to the house, came back, and there's this little kid. And he looks at me and he's like, "Is my grandpa dead?" And I said, "No, not yet, but we're working on him." And I got in the back of the squad and I was like, that little kid probably thinks we're back here trying to kill his grandpa.
You've ruined that small child. If anybody knows if anybody is in therapy right now.
Superhero.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago. Yeah, you might want to take that one out.
Yeah, we'll definitely take that one out. And I mean, obviously, you have probably 100 or more stories like that, right?
Yeah. But I will tell you, I guess if we're kind of getting close to wrapping this up, I'll tell you, the years that I did spend in the fire service, they taught me a lot. They taught me about, as I've said a couple of times, respect and empathy for others. It taught me a very, very strong work ethic that I still have today, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Yeah, wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Loved it.
That's awesome.
Curious. What is one phrase in the fire service, before we wrap up, what's one phrase in the fire service?
It don't matter to me. I'm here till 7. I hate that. I hate it.
He had it right
He
there.
knew it.
He knew it.
I hate it when people say that.
Man.
Yeah, that's it.
Why?
It sends me a message that somebody doesn't really care,
Mm-hmm.
It sends me a message that someone may be just a little bit on the lazy side, and I don't dig that. I don't dig that at all.
Goes right back to what you said about what does your community deserve?
Yeah.
What do they expect?
Work ethic, man.
Yeah.
Work ethic. Yeah, I'm here till 7. It don't matter to me none. Oh man, it's just
real
now when
Southern
this
drawl,
airs,
man.
everybody's going to be saying that to me probably.
Gotcha.
Kurt. No, that's awesome. We'll wrap up. I appreciate your time. Obviously, it's been a good time. What are you looking forward to? You got anything coming up? Fun, exciting? Talked about FDIC.
Honestly, I'm looking forward to getting to FDIC. I get to see a lot of friends that I haven't seen for a year, and it's like anytime that we, I know a lot of people from being in this industry for so long, and a lot of them I haven't seen for a year or 3 or 4 years, and it'll be like we just saw each other the other day. Yeah. So I'm looking forward. I like doing FDIC. It's a great show. So if you're there, come by and see us, booth 40 and 901.
Now,
This won't air till after FDIC.
I know.
yeah, but that was a good plug. I've never been to FDIC. What should I'm tagging along with y'all. What should I be?
Hang out with RJ and do whatever RJ says to do, and that'll get you in trouble and call me for bail money.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. That might be the first 2 things said.
It's for us as a
Are
company.
we advertising for FDIC? Is that what we're doing now?
Currently,
Yeah.
maybe
Okay, go ahead.
If it
2025 though.
it really is, it's the biggest show in the U.S. and it's a great time for us in the industry to see some of the guys that work for the company that we don't get to see very often. And again, it's just like we saw them like 2 weeks ago. We've and that's and I know I'm getting off topic here, but that's one of the really, really cool things I think about our company is we've built such a tight friendship and brotherhood amongst all of us here.
Yep.
So I really enjoy that. So it's a great show. I think you'll dig it.
Cool. Thank you. Looking forward to it.
I appreciate you guys having me on the podcast. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for your time.
I
Thanks
hope
for
we
coming
have more than 7 listeners, and
7 would be great.
Yes, that would be great.
Wait, are
Yeah.
you wrapping this up? Is that how we're doing this?
Well, I guess I did kind of
he's
take the
gonna come
lead.
back for the intro and the wrap up.
Oh, that could be
every time?
yeah.
Every episode.
Every
yeah.
episode,
I think we'll just give
We'll
it
just be on a loop. It'll just
Yeah.
be on a loop. Okay, well, thanks for listening to the podcast. See you next time on Feel the Fire.
The name changes every time.
Put some water on it.
That's how we should do this. We should just have the guests start them and wrap them.
And
Hey, that's
you
a good
just-
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to, and we'll change the name of the podcast every time. Whatever you want to call it, that's fine. Put some water on it.
Put some water on it. What should we do? The fire's getting bigger. Put some more water on it.
All right. Thank you, sir. It's
I
been a
appreciate
pleasure.
you guys having me
Appreciate
on.
it.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Till next time.
Till next time.